Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, July 10th, 2017. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, is a false flag in Syria being readied? More talk of Syria preparing a chemical attack on the eve of Trump and Putin reaching a Syrian ceasefire agreement. Also, Nikki Haley has her fingerprints all over foreign policy in Syria, and she has now doubled down on the Russian influencing our election false narrative. Meanwhile, major infighting on Capitol Hill as the debate on health care looms on. Many Republicans growing sick of Obamacare are ready for action. And then, Trump protesters being bussed in by Soros-paid groups. We talk with the man who caught footage of this happening in Baltimore. All that and more tonight on the Infowars Nightly News.
Actually, Nikki Haley saying we have seen signs that there's preparations underway in Syria for a new chemical weapons attack, and we will go to war if that happens. We were all very concerned about that happening. I have an update on that today about the sloppy, failed controls on sarin gas at a U.S. Army proving ground. But first, before we do this, let's go back and review what was actually said. And this was 2 weeks ago. The White House warned there were potential preparations for another chemical weapons attack by the Syrian regime. And they said at the time that Assad would face a heavy price if one was carried out. No details were given, no examples, no visuals at all, no proof that this was the case, but threatening this. And we were all very concerned that they might be setting up a stage for a false flag attack. And then Nikki Haley, of course, the ambassador to the military-industrial complex, and coincidentally the UN as well, said any further attacks done to the people of Syria will be blamed on Assad, but also on Russia and Iran, who support him killing his own people. And this, of course, is another example of no motive, because at this point in time, the Syrians were making good progress, as they were before, against ISIS. Let's listen to her, and this is the video that she cut, warning about potential war.
The goal is at this point not just to send Assad a message, but to send Russia and Iran a message that if this happens again, we are putting you on notice.
Yeah, we're putting you on notice. That's the dangerous side of the new Cold War with Russia. We can play all these games that CNN and others are doing. Oh, they hacked our election. Well, we don't really mean that they hacked our election. What we mean is that they told the truth about Hillary Clinton, which cost her the election. But this is the dangerous part. This is pushing for a forever war. Let's take a look at the reality of what's going on with this and with the failed Russian narrative. New evidence of both of these today from Zero Hedge. They point out sarin was unaccounted for at a U.S. Army's the U.S. Army's Dugway proving ground. They say a new internal U.S. Army investigation found the most deadly chemical and biological agents known to man were improperly handled and tracked at the Army's Dugway proving ground. They say Dugway is the focus of international headlines. Remember back in 2015, the investigation where they had live anthrax that was shipped to 194 laboratories using commercial carriers like Federal Express. That occurred in 50 states and 9 foreign countries. At the time, many people, they said 24 personnel at Dugway were treated for potential anthrax exposure. An Army Review Board disciplined 10 civilians and military overseers. It included a career-killing reprimand of the base commander, Brigadier General William King. Now, today we have the Army Times pointing out the latest investigation that's been conducted by the Department of Defense Inspector General specifically identified failed protocols and oversight while tracking inventories of sarin nerve agent. And they point out sarin is deadly in extremely small amounts, even at low concentrations. Dugway also handles and tests other well-known nerve agents like VX. Let me tell you, this is very serious because just on the surface, from what the Army Times and the Department of Defense Inspector General said, just on the surface of what we know, this is more incredibly reckless behavior from the place that they say is, quote, the high-risk, zero-defects world of biological select agents program. They say that's ground zero. They're at Dugway Proving Grounds. So these are the people that are creating chemical and biological agents, and they're shipping live anthrax around, and they don't have any They've got failed protocols in terms of tracking sarin gas and VX gas. But it's also something else to this. Remember, a couple of years ago, we had a whistleblower contact us from an Air Force base saying we have a convoy of nuclear weapons being moved out of here, and this Air Force base presumably does not have nuclear weapons. We aren't told where they're going. And at the same time, we had Lindsey Graham talking to people in South Carolina and saying we could have a nuclear attack right here in our harbor. Same time that was happening. And so here we have a situation where they're talking about how they don't have the ability to safely track and control things like sarin gas. At the same time, we've got Nikki Haley talking about, well, we see preparations underway for a sarin gas attack. Maybe they saw it at their own Army base. Now, this article also points out a 2011 incident involving a misplaced vial of less than 1 milliliter of VX, less than a quarter of a teaspoon. It sent the 800,000-acre base into complete lockdown. It was resolved when they found the VX vial was found to have been mislabeled. We see this also with the CDC. It's very dangerous to have the Center for Disease Control and these Army bases creating these programs and not being able to track and control them adequately. And yet, the timing of this announcement, the timing of Nikki Haley's announcement, as well as this Army report should give us all grave concern that there's something more than just gross incompetence at work here. Meanwhile, as we had Donald Trump meeting last week in Europe, meeting with Vladimir Putin, we had Nikki Haley coming out and saying everybody knows that Russia meddled in our elections, pushing back immediately on President Trump and what he had to say. I would say it's more like backhanding him than pushing back against Donald Trump. She said that right after Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had said that Trump brought up the issue of election hacking to President Putin on Friday's G20 summit in Hamburg. Trump, as the Hill points out, has been hesitant to say publicly that Russia meddled in the election. And what he said after that meeting was, quote, nobody really knows for sure. Except, of course, our ambassador, Nikki Haley, who was always a never-Trumper. And now she comes out and says, no, everybody knows that they did it, in contradiction to what he had to say. She said everybody knows they're not just meddling in the United States elections. They're doing this across multiple continents. They're doing this in a way. They're trying to cause chaos within the countries, and we're not going to put up with it. We're going to do something about it. Maybe what we'll do is have a false sarin gas attack so we can really come after the Russians, because that's what Nikki Haley is. She's not the ambassador to the United Nations. She's a spokeswoman for the U.S. military-industrial complex. We need to call her out for what she is. Now, as she's talking about the Russians hacking, let's take a look at this other article from Zero Hedge. New research shows that Guccifer 2.0 files were copied locally, suggesting that the DNC was not hacked by Russians. That would be in line with what we heard from Julian Assange and a former UK ambassador who said that he came into the United States to have a whistleblower within the DNC hand him the information. Julian Assange would not comment on that, but he did say it was not a state actor that gave us this information. Now, this is coming, this is from Zero Hedge via Disobedient Media. They said new meta-analysis has emerged from a document published today by an independent researcher known as the Forensicator, which suggests that files eventually published by Guccifer 2.0 persona were likely initially downloaded by a person with physical access to a computer, possibly connected to the internal DNC network. The individual most likely used a USB drive to copy the information. The groundbreaking new analysis irrevocably destroys the Russian hacking narrative and calls the actions of CrowdStrike and the DNC into question. Disobedient Media previously reported CrowdStrike is the only group that has directly analyzed the DNC servers. And of course, it's not just Disobedient Media. Lee Stranahan and I have talked about this. We've talked together about this, the fact that CrowdStrike, and this is being ignored by most of the media, CrowdStrike is the only source on this. So that even when we have the retraction from the New York Times and the Associated Press saying, well, okay, it wasn't 17 agencies, it was 3 or 4 agencies. No, it wasn't. This was a CrowdStrike report that Clapper shopped to a hand-picked group of political sycophants. And as one former intelligence official said, this has the stench of politics to it. Yes, absolutely does. This was a political operation conducted by our intelligence organizations and law enforcement organizations who violated the law. That is the real news, that our intelligence agencies have become politicized and active in this, that the intelligence agencies have become the Watergate burglars. That should make us all very afraid. Far more than anything that Russia could do is the concern of what we see from Homeland Security and these other intelligence agencies getting involved in our elections. They say this is based solely on information ultimately provided by CrowdStrike. This places the company in the unique position of being the only direct source of evidence that a hack ever even occurred. And here's the point, folks. The group's president, Sean Henry, is a retired executive assistant director of the FBI. Surprise, surprise. Like Comey, like Andrew McCabe, who was under multiple investigations for things like violations of the Hatch Act, ethical violations, and other issues. Their co-founder, Dmitry Alperovich, oh, sounds like a Russian guy, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, which is linked to George Soros. And they say on their website, at present it looks a lot like Sean Henry and Dmitry Alperovich, CrowdStrike executives working for either the Hillary campaign or the DNC leadership, were very likely to have been behind the Guccifer 2.0 operation. They point out the document states that files that eventually published in an NGP VAN by Guccifer 2.0 were first copied to a system located in the Eastern time zone, and they document the technical details of this as to why they say this is the case to some detail. We're not going to go into that verbally here on air, but you can read that report yourself. So the question is, and the question is asked by the American conservatives, so why is Nikki Haley still Trump's UN ambassador? I would say, why was she even picked in the first place as an ever-Trumper? Perhaps it was Donald Trump feeling that he had to offer an olive branch to that side of the Republican Party. But are there no consequences for any of these actions? Are there no consequences for Comey violating the law or Hillary violating the law? Or for somebody like Nikki Haley disputing President Trump, shutting down what he had to say, directly contradicting him immediately? Or for continuing to push this narrative from Hillary and CNN about the Russians? Or, even more importantly, for trying to push us into a shooting war with Russia? Are there no consequences for that? And as this writer, Philip Giraldi from the American Conservative points out, he said he went to a meeting, he was talking to Trump supporters who, he said, like him, had voted for him based on the expectation of a more rational foreign policy. They were suggesting the president's attempts to move in that direction had been sabotaged by officials inside the administration who want to maintain the current warfare state. And that's true. They are trying to foment endless conflict here. And he points out Nikki Haley has been shooting from the lip since she assumed office, but she is firmly in the neocon camp. Remember, she was praised endlessly by people like Lindsey Graham and the Murdoch Group and the National Review and the Weekly Standard. All the never Trump people were saying, oh, this is a great pick. And we see her joined by, of course, H.R. McMaster, Rex Tillerson. Surprisingly, and he puts Mattis in that, I don't see Mattis doing that. As they were pushing this narrative and shooting down a plane in Syria, we had former General Mattis, Defense Secretary James Mattis, come out and say, remember back on June 28th, he said, the U.S. is going to continue to deconflict with Russia. We want to avoid an endless war in Syria. A little breath of fresh air from somebody who perhaps has seen enough war that he doesn't want to continue it. He said the military is pursuing very active deconfliction line, and he says we refuse to get drawn into a fight in the Syrian civil war. I believe that there is a division within the White House that McMaster and Nikki Haley are on the side that are trying to draw us into the Syrian civil war. He is, Mattis, is more concerned about stopping ISIS, not about regime change. And so when we look at what's happened with Donald Trump Jr. today, I think it would be right to ask this of the UN ambassador, Nikki Haley. Kellyanne Conway went to CNN and talked to Cuomo and said, aren't you embarrassed to talk more about Russia than America? And I would say that should be the case with Nikki Haley and others. Aren't you embarrassed to continue to push this false narrative about Russian hacking? Aren't you embarrassed, or shouldn't you be removed from office for trying to promote a world war, trying to get us involved in a Syrian war? Let's quickly take a look at what happened with Donald Trump Jr. You know, the mainstream media saw this article from Circa and immediately said, oh, he met with a Russian, therefore that proves our narrative. No, it doesn't. First of all, anybody that is doing opposition research, there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's not a crime. The Clinton campaign did that. Remember, they did an entire movie talking about their war room where they went through and looked at opposition opposition news and how they could combat it. And, of course, George Stephanopoulos, who's now an anchor at ABC, was a big part of that. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's guilt by association. And who created this meeting? We need to take a look at this. And this was in the very first article, and Drudge has flagged that, saying, is this a setup? I think it's dirty dossier part due, quite frankly, because we look at this. He pointed out specifically we have learned, and this is President Trump's legal team, we have learned that the person who sought the meeting is associated with Fusion GPS, a firm which, according to public reports, was retained by Democratic operatives to develop opposition research on the president and which commissioned the phony Christopher Steele dossier. Remember the dirty dossier? That came from Christopher Steele. It came from Fusion GPS, an unregistered Russian agent. And they were also James Comey tried to hire them with the FBI. These are the questions that need to be asked. We need to ask what is going on with our corrupt law enforcement and intelligence agencies that got involved in violation of the law and lied to us about what was going on. That's the real issue. That's really what is involved here with this Donald Trump Jr. thing. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We've taken thousands of years of known research and put it together with our own 4 years of seeking and testing to find the very best systems that God gave us through Mother Nature to detoxify the body. That's why I'm introducing Z-Shield, toxic metal and chemical defense support. It's made in the USA. It's filled with known compounds from nature that are absolutely associated with detoxifying the body, and it supports the Infowar. It is a classical 360 win. Our formula at InfoWarsLife.com is, quite frankly, simple. We go out and look at the recognized research, and we take it to the next level of quality, of purity, and of strength. Because this is what I personally use for myself and my family. We've gone through 5 or 6 different permutations in the last 4 years since we launched Infowars Life to actually come up with this. This is the formula that I personally have been taking for over a year, and now we believe we have come as close to perfection when it comes to a detoxifier as you can possibly get. If you're not mitigating the pesticides, the heavy metals, the chemicals, if you're not trying to purify your water, if you're not trying to take products like Z-Shield that are full of known concentrated compounds that help purify our cells and our bodies, you're crazy. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, and you owe it to the future of this country and the world that patriots stay as healthy and as clean and as focused as you can be, because we need you, the remnant of America, to reignite those brush fires to the next level and to be healthy and as focused as you can be. Because if you're sick, if you're over there on the sidelines and not in the fight, you're basically giving in to the New World Order. Thanks to your support and your prayers, together, we're changing the world. Now it's time to change our bodies with Z-Shield at InfoWarsLife.com.
I want to tell you about some of the products at InfoWarsStore.com. We are under constant attack. You know it by now from the mainstream media. They're trying to attack us on every level. Now with the YouTube scandal, they're demonetizing our channels, which again takes a huge chunk out of our income, which is why we always appreciate and rely on you getting the products, because that's how we stay afloat. They can't get to us that way. They can't pressure you to not buy the products. They don't have that power. And that's why you're the key to this entire operation. We have Super Blue fluoride-free toothpaste, bubblegum flavor, just arrived at InfoWarsStore.com. This is by listener request. Bubblegum flavored Super Blue toothpaste now available at InfoWarsStore.com in limited supply. Again, if you're not using fluoride-free toothpaste by now, then you're absolutely insane. Harvard studies, it reduces IQ, it causes bone cancer. It's not great, let's just put it that way, and I've been using it for about, 15 years now? So you're going to buy it anyway. Why not buy it from us? It's in limited supply, but it is available at InfoWarsStore.com with the new bubblegum flavor, Super Blue fluoride-free toothpaste, and it supports this network, which is under constant demonization and attack, because we don't take big fat checks from George Soros. We don't get put on extremist lists even though they want us to. That's how they're taking away the YouTube money. That's why we need your support more than ever, because we're not funded by giant corporations who are now pulling the plug on YouTube as they move it into a TV thing, a Netflix model, to drown out independent voices. So support us by getting the products at InfoWarsStore.com.
Welcome back. Remember on July 1st, Saturday, July 1st, we had Donald Trump asking the 24 states that refused to comply with the Election Integrity Commission. He said, "What are you trying to hide?" He tweeted out, "Numerous states are refusing to give information to the very distinguished voter fraud panel. What are they trying to hide?" Exactly. What are they trying to hide? The Hill pointed out at the time the request was for information that is publicly available under each state's law. So why would they not comply with that? We've kind of seen this happen before. Immediately after Trump was elected, we had people in California say, we want to make sure that we hide these lists of gang members in California because we don't want these people deported. Because we might have somebody who's falsely identified as a gang member. So let's leave the MS-13 people here as well. We see this happening over and over again. So now what we had over this weekend, we had reports out of Colorado that hundreds were withdrawing their Colorado voter registration in response to the state of Colorado saying they were going to comply with the commission's request for information. Out of Denver, the denverchannel.com, they said at least 2 Colorado county clerks say they've seen a large increase in the number of people who've withdrawn their state voter registration since Colorado Secretary of State Wayne Williams said he would send the Trump administration's Election Integrity Commission some voter roll information in accordance with state law. In Denver, they saw a 2,150% increase. In Arapahoe County, they said 160 people at least had withdrawn their registration since July the 1st. She said dozens of others had made their voter registration confidential. In Adams County, they said about 30 to 40 people had done this. And they say they're going to allow some of these people to become confidential voters. They can pay a $5 fee. They can pull out a sworn affidavit at their local city or county clerk's office and say they're concerned that they might be subject to bodily harm or harassment from Donald Trump, as if their voter information is made public. Is there a penalty for perjury if you take out a sworn affidavit like that? I mean, is that something that they have on the books in California? Because I think there's some conservative actors in Hollywood that could really use that kind of protection. This is public information. And as I pointed out on Twitter, I had people come back and say to me, I said, why aren't we concerned about the TSA or about the NSA? No, it's only when the government and corruption within the government is exposed that they seem to care about privacy. That's when the ACLU gets involved. And now we have had, according to Reuters today, after they complained about this over the weekend, they're saying that Trump's election panel has now been put on hold. President Trump's commission to investigate possible election fraud today put a freeze on its effort to collect sensitive voter data from states in the face of growing legal challenges. They say the bipartisan panel, led by Vice President Mike Pence and Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, had asked 50 states for a host of voter data. They say most states have rejected full compliance, which many called unnecessary and a violation of privacy. Again, why is that a violation of privacy? We heard from a court that shut down North Carolina's voter ID law, photo ID. They said, no, this targets minorities with surgical precision. Really? They have to have photo ID to cash a check. They have to have photo ID to fly. Why is it that we're not concerned about the TSA and this fake security theater that is there to get us accustomed to their control techniques, to their hands on our bodies, to them x-raying us, to doing anything that they wish to us? Why are we so disconcerted about that, but we're so concerned that we don't want anybody that's going to be a voter to have proper ID. They say in Wisconsin, election officials halted plans to inform the commission how it could purchase for $12,500 its public voter data. See, anybody can buy this. It costs $12,500, but this isn't something that is super secret. It is available for people to take a look at. But they have now shut this down. And remember, we reported back in June 20th, Trump was right. A new study reveals up to 5.7 million illegals voted in the election. That was a new study that looked at the 2008 election, and it was based on data from Harvard and YouGov. And they said it included a sample size of tens of thousands of voters, including non-citizens who readily admitted that they were not eligible to vote. And as I've pointed out, in North Carolina, where there are no photo ID requirements, somebody that was a friend of my brother-in-law's went to vote, and they said, sorry, you've already voted, and so is this other person at your household. All you have to do is show up with a name and an address. And, of course, the other person in his household that had voted was his deceased mother. Terry McAuliffe, close ties to the Clintons, is one of the people trying to obstruct efforts to investigate voter fraud. And as the article pointed out, the decision not to cooperate comes after a year in which Governor Terry McAuliffe circumvented the Commonwealth Supreme Court to restore voting rights for convicted felons and stalled efforts by the Virginia legislature to fight voter fraud. See, that's what's really behind this, folks. Donald Trump was right. Why are they trying to hide? They have created a situation that invites fraud, and that's very important to understand. Now, today we had Comey, and news broke over the weekend. News broke actually yesterday, an article from The Hill saying that more than half of the memos that former FBI Director James Comey kept about the meetings that he had with Donald Trump, he kept 7 memos that he said he created, and would just have his word for it, that he created them at the time. And it's his word against Trump's as to what was said there. But there were 9 meetings, and he created 7 memos. 4 of those memos actually have classified document markings on them. But according to FBI policy, all of those memos are government property. They're all government documents. And so he did the same thing that we all know that Hillary Clinton did. Violated the law, put classified documents and government documents on her own personal computer, and so did James Comey. But of course, if you're a Navy sailor on a sub, you will go to jail for doing that. Don't try this at home. Remember, James Comey told us? And so that's what they're doing. And it was interesting today to see the Washington Post spin this and say that Trump accused James Comey of breaking the law after watching a Fox News report, Fox and Friends. And yet what they were reporting on was the Hill article. They tried to spin it that way so that people would think it was purely a partisan issue. Now, I want to quickly, in the time we have left, I want to talk about a case that I think tells us a lot about where we are in this country. It was on the Drudge Report. It happened in Dallas. The IRS shutting down a mom and pop dressmaker, selling their dresses within hours. And this is a couple, an elderly couple from Thailand, who's never been accused in court of violating any federal law. See, they don't have to even accuse you, let alone find you guilty, before they can take everything you worked for your entire life. These 2 individuals, the man is 72, his wife is 68. As I point out, they're elderly immigrant couple from Thailand. They have had for decades a store called Me's Bridal and Tuxedo in the Dallas area. They went out of business after serving their customers for decades. Their entire inventory of wedding gowns and dresses, as well as sewing machines and other equipment, were sold at auction. This is from the Dallas News. They say the hastily called sale netted the IRS only about $17,000 of the $31,000 that they allegedly owed. Now the balance is unrecoverable from the U.S. government because they've taken everything this couple had in their life. They have now sued. They said the agents auctioned off before their very eyes the family's entire life savings for pennies on the dollar. Their inventory was $615,000. And instead, what the IRS did was they went in and marked down the inventory to $6,000, from $615,000 to $6,000, which means that based on the number of dresses they had, that comes to less than $4 per wedding dress. That is outright theft. And it goes back to what we were warned about in 1819. We were told by the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall, he echoed the arguments of Daniel Webster in 1819, who said, the power to tax is the power to destroy. And the IRS is the organization that began the whole concept of civil asset forfeiture, where there is no trial, where there is no presumption of innocence, where there is no accusation other than the demands from a government bureaucracy. And now this is metastasized. It has gone from them to the FAA, to the EPA, and even, of course, especially to the DEA. That's civil asset forfeiture. If we don't get control of this, if we don't restore our private property rights, if we don't restore the Constitution, we will not only have no property rights, we will be the property. We will be their slaves. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Electrify your day with Secret 12. It's like lightning in a bottle. We all have days in which we just can't seem to perform at the level we'd like to. Infowars Live Secret 12 is designed to naturally energize your body and mind with 2 great tasting and super high quality forms of vitamin B12. Proper vitamin and nutrient intake is essential to keep your body functioning at optimum levels. The reality is, it's hard to take in the proper amount of vitamins we need each day with our modern diets. Secret 12 by Infowars Live is an easy way to naturally upgrade your vitamin B12 intake and support your body's natural systems. It pairs 2 forms of vitamin B12 into one explosive formula. Vitamin B12 supports healthy energy levels through red blood cell formation and aiding in the body's natural processes, but it also assists with many other functions of the body. Electrify your mind and body and take your health to the next level. Experience the power of Secret 12 at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com.
Vitamin Mineral Fusion. Visit InfoWarsLife.com to secure your canister. We have worked for years with our chemists and scientists to create the most powerful and affordable, great-tasting multivitamin formula available. Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix at InfoWarsLife.com is loaded with a full month's supply of essential vitamins, minerals, and amino acids that your body absolutely needs. In the history of InfoWars Life, we've brought out a lot of amazing products like Survival Shield X2, Super Male Vitality, and so many others. With its unique delivery system and proprietary manufacturing process designed for maximized effects, this formula is the platinum standard of multivitamin mineral products. And this part is most important. The ingredients in Vitamin Mineral Fusion are either plant-derived or of the highest quality lab standard. That means it's clean. That means it's pure. And rest assured, you're fighting the tip of the spear in the info war. That's InfoWarsLife.com and Vitamin Mineral Fusion. Take action now before we sell out. We have the new product at InfoWarsLife.com, BioTrue Selenium.
We've had so many requests over the years for selenium, and just recently we were able to source a certified organic, bioavailable selenium from mustard seed extract. When you take selenium in the body, it actually benefits the detoxification systems in your body. It helps balance the thyroid gland. It helps detoxify.
Selenium is another one of those absolute must-haves.
The highest concentration of selenium is in the thyroid gland, but it's actually used all over the body. As a matter of fact, there's 25 genes in the body that are directly dependent upon selenium. So it really is a all-around nutrient that everybody really needs.
I'm taking it now every day. This is so key. BioTrue Selenium is the product, the best selenium that we could bring you. We believe it's the best out there at a very, very low price. Exclusively available at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139. We're selling a product, DNA Force, that is the very best nutraceutical that we can produce. Dr. Group, you took years for you to develop DNA Force for us.
It's been something that I've been working on for a long time, Alex, because I think it's very, very important. What the aging process is when the cell replicates, we lose a little bit of our telomeres. Telomeres are the little cups on the end of our chromosomes.
And when it runs out, you start dying.
We chose the PQQ because it has over 175 different clinical trials. It's one of the most effective substances in the world. It works like an antioxidant. It works to repair nerve growth factor.
So this is a formula to deliver the maximum amount. It's in powder form.
We have so many 5-star reviews. I take this. This is the product that I take.
InfoWarsLife.com, and the profit we make. We fight the globals. We fight the New World Order. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
Well, we know that George Soros is paying protesters and busing them into cities, but now we have the footage from a Baltimore protest of these protesters getting off of a bus and going right to a protest. I'm now joined by Alistair Williamson, who runs stockboardasset.com out in Baltimore. That's where he's located, an independent journalist in his own regard. And Alistair, you actually captured some pretty incredible footage. You got the protesters getting off of the bus and going right into the protest. Tell us about when you witnessed this.
Owen, thanks for having me on here. I couldn't have done it without squawker.org, by the way. Their editors helped me with this whole entire piece and helped to film this. What we came across was a protest on the 8th of July. So this was on Saturday. And what we had was a Soros-inspired / Soros-funded protest, about 500 individuals in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was pretty much focused around immigration. What I started to notice was a bunch of buses started coming to the scene, and I'm saying to myself, school's not in session. First of all, it's summertime and it's the weekend. And I just started knowing this reoccurring theme of just bus after bus after bus. And what I actually heard the speakers in this protest saying, we have to wait for the buses to all come here before we can march on the streets. What you're seeing here are individuals coming out of the bus and joining the protest before everyone was able to get to the street. And it's a remarkable sight to see, because usually we have video of just the buses lined up or just maybe speculation of buses. But this is actually a bus of individuals getting off on camera and migrating and walking right into the protest.
Yeah, and we were talking before the interview. I was saying the only time I ever caught buses, the protest was already kind of ongoing. It was already en masse, so we couldn't really capture the footage of them literally going from bus into the protest, literally going from bus to protest, and you captured that. But just to lay the groundwork, you know, I followed your work. My understanding is, I guess you were just going there to cover the protest. You caught live the protest. You're going to do your typical independent journalist work that you're usually doing out there in Baltimore, and it just happened right in front of you.
Being conscious, understanding a different reality than what you're given, you can understand the blueprint of what these individuals are trying to do, and you can see through the BS is how I say it. I noticed it. I saw it, and I saw how the mechanism was moving. Now I'm able to show this to everybody from point A to B to C of how these protests are formed. And it's not conspiracy anymore. This video is fact. You can't get away from that. Look at the buses on the side of the street. To anyone else, that would be just a bunch of buses. Who knows? But to me, and to the way I tell the story, and I show you in an unedited view, this is how a majority of the protesters got to the site and then were able to march in the streets without a marshal or without a police figure. And they shut down city streets, shut down commerce. I'm sure you broke a bunch of walls there. But this is a understanding of how these protests are started with
an absolute bombshell video from Alistair Williamson of Stockboard Asset. Now, we've got the video. I want to move forward real quickly. Talk about the people that were in the protest. Did you talk to them? What were they saying?
I tend not to talk to anyone during any of these protests. I merely just show what reality is and who attends. And what I was able to pick up at these protests was Casa de Maryland. There was a bunch of individuals that had these shirts. And if we actually go to Open Society, which is George Soros's website, we're able to see U.S. programs, Casa de Maryland Incorporated, and a large sum of money that has been donated from Open Society to Casa de Maryland. Now, the keynote speaker in this protest, I agreed with her on one point. She was talking about jobs. She was talking about how the industries left many, many years ago. 100% correct. What she failed to say was who to place the right blame on, not placing the blame on the individuals, the Democrats who've been running the city down the hole for many of decades. One very interesting quote I have here is basically how she was talking about a revolution. and to the standpoint of a violent revolution, saying, look, we all must unite and come together and basically pick up anything that you have. Pots and pans and blunt objects is what she said, and that sent chills down my back. Now, what happened after that? Because usually with these protests, you have about 3 or 4 speakers, and you have the keynote speaker, and that's about 45 minutes to an hour. What happened after that is after all the buses came, the keynote speaker was done. We then moved to the city street. We shut down the city street, and I was able to give you all an insight of just what is happening in these protests while a march is going down the street. And you're disrupting commerce, you're shutting down traffic, and it's very disrupted. Now, if you look at the video of marching down the street, you will notice who is leading the charge. It's Casa de Maryland. Look at their shirts. You can see Casa right there. And you can understand who's really in charge of these protests. Who's really...
And it's amazing to me, too, because they want to sit here and they'll try to paint a different portrait every time they protest. As you said, they want to say the big thing here is immigration. They get Casa de Maryland out there. That's what they're going to say. It's anti-Trump. It's anti-Trump. All of this is motivated by Trump hate. All of this funding comes from George Soros. It's the same people. It's the same protest. I don't care what type of spin they try to put on it.
I can't say some of the words that was not just written down and or echoed in a verbal sense, but it was directed towards Trump, and it would make your ears blush. I mean, or it would make your ears just turn off.
Well, it's infuriating. I don't want to fight with these people. These people aren't my enemy, but they're so tricked. They've been so deceived that now they have decided to go on the George Soros side of it, go on the anti-American side of it, and they want to push a civil war. It's all coming from George Soros. He's pushing it during the summer. We know that this is what they like to do. Now, you actually are going to break some big news with us right now. Baltimore has been, it's had some trouble. We'll just put it that way. And you've been covering this on your website, stockboardasset.com. But now it's gotten so bad that they've had to call, from what I understand, is a citizen ceasefire?
That is correct. I have great sources within the Baltimore city government and even the men and service women who serve our great city here. And this was given to me by them, that this is a citizen ceasefire that we see of nobody kill anybody. That's how bad. We have some of the worst homicide rates in the country. And this is for August 4th, 2017 to August 6th. And this is basically about 72 hours of no violence. And it says we have to start nowhere. The hashtag on this is Baltimore ceasefire. This is bad, guys. This is really bad. And what Trump is doing here and bringing the attention to our inner cities, we're going to finally know what's wrong with them. We're going to finally understand what has been happening over the past 40 to 50 years. Because for the most part, we've been living in an illusion. We've not been able to understand what is wrong with them. And once we start understanding what's wrong with our inner cities, we can find solutions as a collective unit.
Well, and let's be very clear, too. There's a cycle here. You know, the visible thing that we see is the poverty, the homelessness, the violence. That's what we see. What causes that? Well, okay, you don't get a job. You lose your job. The economy dries up. You've documented that in Baltimore. That's what's going on. Then you have these people having these protests. They want to virtue signal. They want to point to the problem, but they don't point to the issue. The issue is unfair trade. The issue is the fact that these jobs, these manufacturing plants are all being shipped overseas. That's what Trump wants to bring back. And I think that's what you're saying is once we see that return, then we'll see the return of the great American inner city bustling with life again.
Of course. And a very reoccurring theme, I've not just done this type of journalism, and we'll call it true, real journalism that the mainstream dares not to cover because it destroys their narrative. I've seen this in Detroit. Oh, and you've seen this across the country when you travel. It's these towns, these suburbs. It doesn't matter where you go. We're missing our jobs. We're missing these industries that built the communities around them. And what we have today is basically a community that is non-existent around these industries because they're gone.
It's
and
sad. You go down to these inner cities. My hometown is St. Louis. I'm sure you see it in Baltimore. Buildings boarded up, buildings shut down. It's a sad story. Thank you so much, Alistair.
Thank you, Owen.
That's Alistair Williamson from stockboardasset.com. Follow his work in Baltimore. He's keeping you up to date.
Alex Jones here with a very important news update to anybody out there that wants to be prepared. But it goes beyond being prepared. Our bodies absolutely must have the good halogen iodine or we will die. And you look at all of the thyroid problems and all the people that don't have energy and that have all sorts of hormone problems. And from my research, and a lot of just mainline research, it leads back to iodine over and over and over again. It's as important as vitamin C. If you don't get iodine, you die. But most people are just deficient, so they're low energy, they're sick. You got to have iodine in your body so that your body can produce the hormones you need. It is the base to so many things. And since I got into iodine 4 years ago, we've helped change the entire paradigm by developing and bringing to the public deep earth crystals from 7,000 to 12,000 feet of the purest iodine available. Other iodine comes from the ocean or from other byproducts of chemical facilities, and it's tainted. It's bound. It's not absorbable. I tried it. And I had incredible effects even with dirty iodine because the body needs it. When you don't have iodine, it absorbs the chlorine, the fluoride, and all these other bad halogens. Do yourself and your family a favor and check out the importance of iodine for yourself. I think you're going to be blown away. And whatever you do, support the broadcast and get a bottle of Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2. Also consult your physician because if you've been deficient in it or have other issues, it can have some dramatic effects. As for me and most folks I talk to, it's been a game changer in the positive column, but still consult your physician because iodine is no joke. It's a key building block of the body. And if you haven't had it for a long time and suddenly have it, some folks say they've experienced things like a detoxing effect and things like that. You've got to have vitamin C. You've got to have iodine to live. You've got to have water to live. Iodine is key. You must have it, but consult your physician first before you get powerful Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2 at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll free. We can answer your questions, 888-253-3139.
The G20 in Hamburg, Germany, the annual meeting of 19 of the wealthiest leaders in the world, plus the EU, aimed to ambush Americanism, not globalism, President Trump, with a slew of altered pan-European topics centered around climate change and trade.
And what came out of this meeting was what I had already said at the beginning of this meeting. Wherever there is no consensus that can be achieved, disagreement has to be made clear. You are familiar with the American position. You know that, unfortunately, and I deplore this, the United States of America left the climate agreement, or rather said, announced their intention of doing this. So what becomes clear in this declaration is the dissenting view of the United States, but I am very gratified to note that the other 19 member states of G20 say that the Paris Agreement is irreversible, that we feel committed to the to what we agreed on, and that it is to be implemented as quickly as possible.
Of course, President Trump already bowed out of the lopsided Paris Climate Accord, which saw the U.S. going it alone against the other 19 representatives. And that set the tone, which was augmented by the Soros hordes, led by its American contingent, Refuse Fascism outside the summit, as they destroyed Hamburg residents' cars and businesses, hunted down alternative news journalists, and injured hundreds of police officers in an orgy of anarchy.
These people don't even know what this is all about. They only want to destroy things, and that is what they came here for. Andreas is on the way to his job. His path is littered with burnt objects. Protesters removed our fence and burned insulation mats. Locals understand that people want to protest against capitalism and G20 politicians, but why do they need to destroy cars, shops? This isn't good.
The Daily Caller reports one of Refuse Fascism's fiscal sponsors is the Soros-funded Alliance for Global Justice. Refuse Fascism fascism also claims direct ties to Cornel West, an Ivy League professor and member of the 2016 DNC Platform Committee. West is among several left-wing professors listed as one of the group's initiators, as global pawns like New York City Mayor de Blasio rushed to Hamburg to aid his masters. The New York Post reported presumptive Republican mayoral challenger Nicole Maliotakis blasted the mayor for putting the protest over pressing issues at home. Maliotakis said, "Unbelievable. Instead of jet-setting around the world, he should be here doing his job. A police officer was murdered. Street homelessness has skyrocketed, and people continue to get delayed on the train."
It's disgusting. Why? It's terrible. He's not doing his job. He should be in New York City.
I think it's ridiculous. Why is he there?
While President Trump salvaged what he could from the G20 summit, successfully brokering a ceasefire in Syria with Putin, as victory is currently being declared over ISIS in Mosul by Iraqi Prime Minister al-Abadi, and communicating directly with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese President Xi Jinping over North Korea's growing threat to the world, the true villain of global disorder, George Soros, was putting his money precisely where his mouth is, in the streets of Hamburg, Germany. John Bound reporting for Infowars.com.
I will not respect this president of the United States of America.
Due to the broad and ironclad protections of the First Amendment, a charge of sedition against a U.S. citizen is extremely rare. Nevertheless, sedition remains a crime in the United States under U.S. Code 2384, a federal statute that punishes seditious conspiracy, and 18 U.S. Code 2385, which outlaws advocating the overthrow of the federal government by force. Generally, a person may be punished for sedition only when he or she makes statements that create a clear and present danger to rights that the government may lawfully protect. A person found guilty of seditious conspiracy or advocating the overthrow of the government may be fined and sentenced to up to 20 years in prison. States also maintain laws that punish similar advocacy and conspiracy against the state government. Brooklyn-born Palestinian-American activist Linda Sarsour is walking a tightrope as she tests those federal statutes.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad, that we are struggling against tyrants and rulers, not only abroad in the Middle East or in the other side of the world, but here in these United States of America, where you have fascists and white supremacists and Islamophobes reigning in the White House.
She won't condemn the acid attacks, the women having their genitals cut off, the gays being thrown off buildings, any of it. Any of it. Pro-life feminists aren't allowed to march in those deals, but the Muslim women are. I mean, it's just the most sickening, evil group, using the fact that we're so tolerant to run all over us. Well, guess what? We're awake now, witch. So enjoy your little Hamas meeting, witch. We see you, witch.
Do you defend what she said about this president and really about this country in that soundbite?
You know, jihad is an Arabic word mentioned both in the Quran and the Bible. Bridget, she is from Lebanon, she knows Arabic, and she knows this word is mentioned also in the Bible. If you leave it for us, jihad means to be a better person, more honest, more truthful, and more trustworthy. But of course, if you leave this jihad for ISIS, leave the Quran for ISIS or Bible for KKK, they have different interpretation of it.
Linda Sarsour is the poster child for this red-green axis. She is getting leftist groups to basically push the narrative that Islam is peaceful, Islam has nothing to do with the problem, and yet from a national security standpoint, Islam has everything to do with the problem. Sharia is the blueprint by which all of these jihadi groups operate, whether it's Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, the Muslim Brotherhood, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, fill in the blank. They all say that they're Muslims waging jihad to establish an Islamic State under Sharia, and yet it is people like Linda Sarsour working with the media and groups like CARE, which is Hamas, working with the media to say that this problem has nothing to do with Islam, and it's just factually false.
It is. It's very radical. She was specifically inciting hatred and violence. If these words were coming out of any other person, we would have said, well, you know, that really overstepped the line. But coming from Linda Sarsour, you have to understand her background. This is a lady that comes from a long line of terrorists. Her family members are, as we speak, sitting in Israeli jails for conviction of terrorism. When you look at her praising in her speech at ISNA, Imam Siraj Wahaj, who was a co-conspirator in the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993, she called him her hero and her mentor.
Sarsour is rising as a spokesperson for Sharia law's gradual wedge in the U.S., ironically laying the groundwork to create no-go zones similar to those all over Europe where women aren't welcome. John Bound reporting for Infowars.com.
That's it for tonight's news. Thank you for joining us. Join us again tomorrow night at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for the Infowars Nightly News.